So apparently, Venom will be gay or queer officially in the new Venom, Venom 2, at least according to the director. Are they really going to have this in the movie, or is this part of the marketing? Either way, it's really, really stupid. So I'm going to do primarily a deep dive into the comic book lore and try to show that this really can't really be true. So, where is all this coming from? Well, let's begin with what Venom is and what Venom is not. Venom began basically as a kind of costume through a fight with the Beyonders and the Secret Wars series. Now, I don't have those issues. I'm going to primarily base what I'm saying on Venom in the early 90s because I have those issues. But that's the origins of Venom. It was basically just an alien costume. He was a symbiote. He did bond with initially Spider Man and then with Eddie Brock. But the symbiote itself was not really detailed. We didn't know too much about the background of the symbiote. So we just knew it was an alien and it bonded with XY person, and that was it. Now, to be fair, they did sort of retcon Venom within the comics a few times, but in terms of gender or sexual identity, we really didn't know too much. But then things changed slightly with the Carnage story, which was a three-part series within Amazing Spider-Man. I actually have those issues and remember them pretty well. I did like the story, but I gotta be honest, I think this is sort of the decline of Venom with this Carnage story because I never really cared about Carnage. I thought it was a really silly character. But the three-part series was well done, and I thought hopefully they killed him off and they were going to move on, but nope. Carnage became super popular, and I think they just started to mess up both characters a lot. So they did introduce a bit of a gender angle because we learned that Venom spawned Carnage, right? In terms of the symbiote's own culture, they reproduce asexually. So Venom, quote unquote, Venom the symbiote gave birth to Carnage, but they don't really have families, so it just gave birth to Carnage and didn't really care about him. So that's why Eddie Brock didn't find out about Carnage until Spider-Man alerted him. Now that appears to be a plot hole to me, but now in the cartoon series, it was slightly different because they did give Venom much more explicit kind of romance with a woman through Eddie Brock, the human side of Venom. They dumbed down the Venom character because it came from a rock. Yeah, it's really stupid, but it's an alien that came from a rock. So there they did kind of introduce a kind of sexual identity, but I gotta be consistent. I didn't really like that in the cartoon either. I thought it was really silly. It was very rushed and forced, but they had a little romance story with Venom. And at least the cartoon series did get some overlapping things with Eddie Brock correct, but it was still very loose. But I think it was okay. If you were a purist, it didn't make a lot of sense there either. So now we get to the movies, and supposedly this was already set up in part one that Venom is queer and that the Tom Hardy version of Eddie Brock has a relationship with the symbiote. And what do I think about this? Well, again, like I said, the cartoon series did kind of give it a sexual identity, and there is a little bit of that in the comics, but really there's nothing here. This is all just made up and phony and silly. But is this good as just gay representation? Well, again, I'm not homosexual, so I don't know if this is good for quote the gay community. I don't know, but I never had much faith in the movies to begin with. I thought they were pretty dumb, but at least the other even bad versions of Venom, there it just seems failures of writing and acting. Like Spider-Man 3 I think is still very atrocious, and that version of Venom is just looks bad. It was badly performed. It just had nothing to do with the character. I will say at least these new Venom films, Venom himself and the costume looks better, but he doesn't really act like a journalist. I've done journalism. I've been around journalists. He doesn't act like a journalist. There seems to be no real understanding of the lore or the mythology or the comics. So it's doing its own thing. And if they want to do their own thing, that's fine. It really has nothing to do with Eddie Brock or Venom or anything. It's just, okay, he's queer or it's queer. And you're like, all right. But it doesn't mean anything. You just added a detail. But there's nothing really referenced. There's no real setup. It's just let's add a detail about the character, and now the detail is he's gay or whatever, and you're like, it has now a gay identity. But I would fight back about people saying, well, this is just silly because the alien can't have quote a gay identity. No, aliens can have those kind of identities. It's just the symbiote never really had that in the early issues. They did add things with gender later, but even that was pretty thin. If you like it, it's fine. I don't really care about these films. It's clearly meant for the new fans, and I don't have any real emotional attachment to this Venom or this Eddie Brock, so they can do whatever they like. But in terms of this somehow being in the character, no, really, it's not. Even with the asexual reproduction and making Venom like quote a father mother figure, it's fairly thin. So there's really nothing really to justify this. This is just purely just adding this stuff for no reason. It's just being added. I don't see how it contributes. It doesn't make things worse because the films were already super stupid to begin with to me. It doesn't really ruin the character because the character is already pretty stupid. And it just seems really annoying to add these details, and they don't really add much to the mythology. It's just a lot of silly PR stuff and marketing, but apparently they're going to do it, and they're being very sincere that yes, now Venom is gay officially. And it's like, okay, well, more power to you. The only Venom I really care about is the early '90s Venom, as well as parts of the cartoon, and that's about it. I hope they go back to the real Venom, but that's probably never going to happen. And that's where we stand with Venom coming out. Thanks for listening.